we're talking about the competency of addressing or resolving what you need to in order to reach the outcome you want for a session. And when I read that, it seemed like quite, I don't necessarily think it's circular logic, but it's almost like before you put your 1 foot forward, you've got to lift the heel, and before you lift the heel, you've got to send the message to the heel, and you never actually end up doing it. So let's see what the hell that's about. Should I read you what the competency says?
Yeah. Good.
In the old PCC markers, it's 2.4, and it says the coach helps the client define what the client believes he or she needs to address or resolve in order to achieve what she wants to accomplish in the session. So there's resolve, achieve, and accomplish, which all seemed like those steps. Bit of a brain blower. A marker is basically the same, except it says partners. So it was, sorry, this is the new marker now. It says the coach partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address to achieve what they want to accomplish in this session. So the client must define something that they believe that they need to address to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. Honestly, I think someone was smoking crack when they wrote this. The new competency is 3.7. Partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address to resolve. Sorry, take that back. Partners with the client to define what the client believes they need to address or resolve to achieve what they want to accomplish in the session. I have an idea. That seems like word salad to me. Okay. And if I were doing mental coaching, I'd say, let's look for the signal in the noise and what's the intent behind all of that. What comes up for you, apart from what I've said?
Yeah, I suppose what's useful for me is to think of, it's probably to come from the intent side. Because what I'm thinking of is the reason why this has been of particular interest to me lately is something fell into place for me where it seemed like this is one of the express competencies that has the potential of taking coaching from a transactional place to a transformational place. And for me, that's what I want the intention to be out of this marker or competency.
Okay. So this, should we just call it a marker from now on?
Yeah, let's keep one.
Okay.
One word.
So this marker has the potential to have a transformational focus instead of a transactional focus.
Yeah.
So And that was attractive to you. What makes that attractive?
Well, transformational coaching is attractive because it's significant in my belief of what coaching is. And one of the old phrases that I hold in my mind is, my job as a coach is to coach myself out of a job. So whatever a client comes to me with in coaching, it's almost like there's a category or a scope of work. And through the coaching, they are dealing with their ability to, or they're growing their ability to deal with, there's a term called wicked problems or wicked issues. So the complexities of this kind of thing. So after the journey in coaching, their ability and competence to deal with that category or scope of complexity is evolved. So they don't, so they would, they are transformed through that process and don't need to rely on an external person to help them each time they come up against that kind of complexity. So that's that's why I hold transformation really dear, and my belief of what coaching is. And at times I've found the markers not so clear in how they directly relate to transformational coaching, but I know as a set they generally enable a coach to do transformational work. But suddenly I had a flash that this might speak quite explicitly to moving a presenting topic that could be transactional into a deeper space, which would lend itself to transformational work.
I agree with you. The value I find in transformational work is that it creates a shift in experience and a shift in being in the session itself that is also sustained after the session. So it's not just a cognitive shift. It's not learning a new process just cognitively. It's not learning new steps. It's not planning specific actions to take, but it's actually creating something different in the person mind. And I think that well, the stuff that is shifted is inclusive of the cognitive, but it is probably a lot more than that. So I also link this to coaching the whole of the person. So I think there's a shift in body, and I think there are different ways that can happen. Like one would be just becoming aware of the body, becoming more integrated with the body, experiencing it. It's a shift in the emotions. So that might be like a cathartic process of resolving resolving a negative feeling, or about rekindling a feeling, or it might be also integrating the feelings in a way where the person is more whole, so able to experience different feelings and also make use of those. And I think that whole system of thinking, somatic feeling and emotional feeling creates something that is greater than just the sum of its parts. So the coaching, that coaching the whole of the person is in itself a transformational process and experience. And once that's done, the transactional stuff, it's unlocked in that there's more potential options available to the person because they're in a new state of being. May come up with options that would have been completely outside of their paradigm of thought or being beforehand.
Yeah.
So in terms of the value that transformational work brings, I think we've both spoken our minds about that. I'm interested in the how of this marker bringing that about.
Yeah. Yeah. This the event that really triggered this in my mind was working with a mentor coaching client, and they're relatively early in their journey of becoming a coach. So they're still at they're at the final phases of their coach training, and grappling with that question of when clients bring a topic that just seems so superficial, like raising questions like, this is my I've got this is my presenting topic, and I want to walk away with some action. I want to walk away with the first few action steps to move forward. And then in the moment, the coach sits and thinks, well, how do you want me to be valuable in this? And try and spend some time contracting that, and it just stays at such a superficial level, and then realizing that actually this person knows all this stuff, but maybe there's something about them not trusting themselves to know the stuff. So in the moment in that establishing the agreement with that client, this kind of marker might demonstrate as, it sounds like you really know these things, but it sounds like you're also not trusting yourself to hear your own action steps. What's that about? Which might get into the deeper work of this, using their language of what do they need to address to achieve, or at times they use the word resolve between the different renditions of the markers. So the action doesn't, the key issue in that coaching session may well not be brainstorming action steps. It's, what do you need to do to trust yourself to identify those action steps?
And I just want to check, you're using that as merely as an example, trust.
Yeah, merely as an example. It's and very closely related to a real mental coaching session that I've had recently. and the coach realizing, hang on, that the markers give me a real practical prompt through this marker to focus more deeply in that establishing the agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because if it's not deeper, then it's staying on the transactional. Then it's just brainstorming action steps. And that's so the question that I don't necessarily ask clients, but that I keep in the back of my own mind is why were they not able to do the actions that they say they want to generate with me in the session on their own? Because there's something standing in the way. And that something could be anything from lack of trust to confidence, which is maybe related. Might be fear. It might be expectation, many different things. It might be some scripty stuff or like a worldview that gets in the way.
Yeah. Thinking linked with that, it's the scripty stuff and worldview about their gremlins or their being stuck in driver behaviors or getting hooked into their internal rackets to dump a whole bunch of TA jargon into the sentence.
Getting involved in relational dynamics and being stuck by those. Psychological games. So you inspired a thought in me, but I've lost it now. It was around action steps and a client wanting to do that in the session. I've lost it. What else is there in your mind about all of this?
Oh, so the reason why this has really tickled me is when I had this insight working with this client. I suppose we created this insight together. Was a thought I've been in this game for a while now, and it just seems so obvious. And I was stumped as to, did I just really miss those couple of pages in the book for 9 years, or has something shifted, or something like that? So what I had done to kind of help myself reality check things was look at the so focusing on the ICF competencies, because these are obviously ICF PCC markers, is look at the old competency framework and realized, okay, no, I'm not going mad, because the competency framework in the past was quite diffuse when it came to the practicalities of contracting in the session. And that was the trigger of developing the original PCC markers, where this first showed its face. And now with the new version of the competency framework, that PCC marker has been pulled through into the competency framework. So it's far more explicit, and with it being explicit, it seems it is far more practical and tangible in getting into, I say, like the real work.
Yeah, I think that the essence of that marker or competency is really valuable. What I was wondering about earlier, I've remembered now, is and it links into what you've just said in some ways. How so we're having a conversation about competencies and markers, and this is the domain of mental coaching. And how does this relate to supervision? And I think one link is when a client comes into a session wanting to focus on the transactional and the coach joins them there, they're getting stuck in the client's process. And I think this is something which is very human and very typical, but that's the invitation to go out of coaching and into conversation and cognitive stuff. So something that can be identified and resolved in supervision. And this, well, as a response, in a responsive way. And what I like about this marker is that it's preemptive, because now there's an awareness that there's something else to resolve before the transactional can be explored. So that's a nice reminder for coaches when they notice they're not doing that, they're likely stuck in the client's process.
Yeah. I was wondering, do you have an example of the supervision example of this in the supervision space that might give a bit more color to it?
Yeah, two jump to mind. The one is where the focus of the supervision session is on the transactional. So it's maybe stuck in the cognitive, or how do I help my client? Then it's an indication of parallel process taking place. So the dynamic that was happening between the client and the coach is now happening between the coach and the supervisor. And the other example would be where the supervision conversation focuses on resolving the coaching client's issue. So supervising or kind of coaching the coach's client through the coach.
Yeah.
So with and maybe a third one, and I think these all kind of relate and can happen simultaneously in some ways, is where the conversation is all about the circumstances and not the internal experiences of the circumstances. So in supervision, the coach might say something like, then I said X, and then my client said Y, and going through a blow by blow account of what happened. We're talking about the client's circumstances as opposed to the internal experiences.
Yeah.
So that, I think those would all be examples of parallel process.
Yeah. Yeah. So the indicators there are supervision clients talking about only about their client and not about their own experience of being with that client.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining past people having said things like, this client is always stuck. We seem to talk about the same thing all the time. My client's the kind of person that yeah, so the focus is only on the client, and it really does invite potentially invites a game of yes, but, like trying to tempt the supervisor to give potential solutions, and then the coach can easily say, yes, that sounds like a good idea, but you don't know this client like I do, so they'll get in the way like this.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a really strong parallel process of the key issue that's just begging to be seen or heard or explored.
Yeah. And in addition to focusing on the client, and it could happen separately too, I guess, is and I'm talking about the coaching client, the coach in supervision might talk about the client's circumstances and what the client is trying to resolve, not necessarily mentioning the client that much. And that shows that psychologically there's a focus on the circumstances and not on the experience of those circumstances.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, is that then like my coaching client is in such a difficult position, their manager is terrible,
There we go.
or their clients are terrible.
Yeah. And then talking about the company and all the issues that the company is going through, or the relationship with the friend that's going wrong, and the friend always says this. So it's talking about the external as opposed to the internal.
Yeah.
And there was something else I wanted to add to that. So when I first encountered parallel process, I gave it a bad rap. And I think I think it's likely that many people will initially see it as a bad thing, but there's so much information in it, which is good. So it's just noise. And if you can pick out the signal from that noise, then it's really useful. So when in supervision, you can identify with your coach what the mode of approaching those circumstances is, then you can see things like psychological drivers, to borrow from the transactional analysis model. There's a modes of problem solving that the coaching client might be using, and that could be related to what the coach is then using through parallel process in order to resolve the circumstances, as opposed to, and that would be a transactional focus, which is merely amplifying the mode of problem solving that's getting the person into the problem, or even deeper into the problem. But the transformational focus would be, what is that mode? And this is where one could branch off into a therapeutic approach, like going back into the past to resolve that, which I don't necessarily think is even useful, because everyone has modes of problem solving that can be categorized, but more into, okay, so this is my default mode of problem solving. I can identify when it's starting to get in the way, like it's amplifying the problem itself. And these are internal things I can do to mitigate going deeper into the problem, and to even leverage that mode. So this is like for a perfectionist, this is the level of achievement that's good enough. For a person who's focused on getting a whole bunch of stuff done quickly at the same time, it might be being realistic about scheduling, realistic about how much can be achieved in an amount of time. For a person who puts others first and themselves last, it could be about meeting some own needs and acknowledging self. And that's the transformational stuff, which not only beneficial to the coaching client at the end of the day, but to the coach as well, because then they can apply that knowledge to any other situation that they encounter in practice.
Yeah. So this is then linking back to the marker language. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be addressed in order to achieve the outcome that they want to get.
So as a supervisor or a mentor coach, how would you start that journey with a client?
I think there's so many potential journeys there's so many potential journeys out there that I think it's quite difficult to try and get to a golden thread in the beginning. The first things that came to mind is that it might look different at times between mental coaching and supervision. I think the nature of the relationship has an impact on that. So mental coaching is often for a finite time, just a few sessions at a time, whereas supervision is often for an ongoing relationship. So in supervision, there's an opportunity to observe patterns that can be really telling indicators. And I like, this turn of phrase of the signal and the noise. Over time with your supervisor, you get to hear even more nuanced signals in the noise. And the objectives are slightly different as well between supervision and mental coaching. So mental coaching, the objective is to develop the coach's ability to demonstrate the competencies. So they might be a bit more. I'm hesitant now. I wanted to say there might be a bit more directness, but I don't think that's mutually exclusive. That's my initial thinking. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of it's circumstantial and dependent on the level of development of the coach. And I want to, I mean, I know that can come across as quite judgmental, maybe. So I want to define that a bit. I think levels of development are about the person's awareness of self. So their awareness of their own modes of problem solving cognitively, their awareness of their own emotions, the awareness of their body, their the coherence of their coaching philosophy or their practice philosophy if it's a supervisor. Also their knowledge, so their knowledge of coaching models, of theoretical frameworks, so understanding the dynamics that can happen in relationships and the roles. In business coaching, it might be things like models which describe different dynamics that can unfold in organizations. Contracting comes to mind immediately. Different understandings of contracting and the things that can happen in contracting, elements of contracting. So depending on all of that, the approaches would be different. As a rule of thumb, a good starting point is to start off being grounded in the session. So be comfortable in the seat, to take some breaths. Often in mentor coaching and supervision, the coach comes to the session maybe slightly flustered or feeling some anxiety. I think that's normal. It can be normal. It's not always the case. And to kind of just settle into one's body and then to note it, holding that situation that you're bringing to the session for reference. Notice what's going on emotionally and physically and cognitively. So there the focus is already on the transformational. So on what are the internal experiences in relation to the external experience or the external circumstances. Yeah. And I think that's probably just conceptually the starting point.
Yeah. So to sum up what I heard you saying there, in summary might not do it justice, but it's observing and meeting where the client is at. And then this we're talking about the client being a coach or a supervisor.
Or even a mentor coach client.
Yeah, that was what I was meaning when I said a coach.
Okay.
So meeting them where they're at in the here and now, and those practices that you said at the end is the grounding in the here and now.
Yeah, that's a really useful position. It's working in the here and now. So that's also the transformational, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're focused on the not now, so the future or the past, it's usually on the circumstances.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be.
No.
Like one can imagine a desired state of being or an experienced state of being in the past.
Yeah. You know, this I got this picture coming to my mind about. So we were talking earlier about the parallel process. So meeting the person where they're at and bringing and being grounded in the here and now is already a stopping, a pause point in a parallel process. It pauses the process. So the metaphor that came to mind is a river network with locks along the way. So there might be river flowing in a certain direction, and then you come to a lock where you need to raise the vessel up or down to meet the next the contours of the land. So coming into a lock is something about meeting where they're at a pause point. So the gates have to close. So you're starting to limit some of the external influences, and you have to take time for the levels to shift and change to be able to progress then in your journey.
It's interesting. I like that analogy, and it's I kind of wish that's not the right way of saying it. I think there are additions to that analogy which would be maybe even supernatural, like when you're in that here and now space, you're no longer going to leave and go down the same canal. You create other ones, maybe multiple other ones, just conceptually, and that empowers you to create a new path, not only for yourself as the practitioner coming to supervision or mentor coaching, but for your own client. That is for me what coaching is about. And I think there's something else that can happen in the here and now. It's not just working with the experience of the person coming to supervision or mentor coaching, but it's what is the supervisor or the mentor coach experiencing, that's tuning in empathically to the parallel process. So I might notice a mode of problem solving coming up in themselves, or certain emotional feelings, or certain physical feelings, or lack of those, or a dynamic between themselves and the client, or the coach.
Yeah, and this is time and time again where the reminder of both for myself and for people that I work with of it's when we get to engage with somebody else that we are able to find the signal in the noise. So maybe when you're sitting in the noise, there might be that complicated thinking of, I should be able to figure this out myself. I don't need somebody else's help. But it's the being able to actually come into that space, engage with somebody else, enables others to start to be able to see the signals and then work with the key issues.
This experience I had, which I found quite striking. I attended a coaching professional body physical get together. This was a couple of years ago, and met a freshly qualified coach who was really sure of himself. He could really talk the talk. Highly energized, very passionate about coaching. And the conversation turned to supervision, and I asked him if he'd experienced supervision or would make use of it. And his answer was no. If anything, if he encounters anything that's problematic or that he hasn't encountered before, he'll just go to his trainers back at the coach training school, and they'll know what to do. And there's so many missed opportunities there if one were to do that, to learn to tune into the here and now and respond to what's happening for the client in the moment as it happens, without having to do the extra step of going to someone else to be told what to do.
Yeah.
And to be critical, I think if a person qualifies as a coach believing that that's the way to do, then it's probably been taught to them implicitly, or maybe even explicitly, that coaching is purely transactional. And the way to resolve issues of practice is just to ask someone else what to do, as opposed to how to be with the person in practice when that comes up. So that, for me, that's one of the striking things about supervision as a practice, is it's quite holistic in nature. It's not about getting advice, but it's about becoming connected to self and to client, and through that connection comes the resolution to the issues that arise.
Yeah. Well, there's a resolution of something potentially in the here and now, and the opening of other canals to go down to support the coaching client's resolution.
And when the practitioner is doing that, through parallel positive process, it invites the coaching client to do that too.
Yeah.
So they transform as a person and become they become more potent and competent.
Yeah. This is what I was saying in the beginning of what I hold near and dear about coaching, is the transformation of being able to work with wicked problems. So a set of complex situations.
Yeah, because life will always have complexity to it, and you can never plan for every eventuality, but you can equip yourself with an approach that will aid you.
Yes.
And new knowledge about self. So this is how I get stuck in these kinds of situations, and being able to not even put the first foot down those avenues.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's it's that thing about changing your approach to life, that you take so many steps down the journey and you realize, oh dear, I've fallen into the trap. What can I learn about this situation? And then you take a few less steps next time and you go, oh dear, I've fallen into the trap again. What can I learn? And that the amount of steps becomes fewer and fewer until you've created new neural pathways, and you don't do it again.
You just hover.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That's what all my clients get at the end of their contracts.
Hoverboard license.
Yeah, something like that.
Let's come see you sometime.
You can come on your hoverboard. I know that you levitate.
I was still pushing with the 1 foot.
Okay.
1 foot on the hoverboard, the other pushing.
Okay. Is that like training wheels for hoverboards?
Yeah, pretty much. Thank you.
Thank you.